We are missing one participant. I should make a general comment here to say that we have really worked against very difficult odds. The fear of a military strike on the region made people either stay at home or go back home before the sensitive 72 hours announced for all airlines. And secondly, because there are strikes in France of trains as well as planes, we are missing some of our participants. So we had to reshuffle some of these sessions, and what you will hear is from key participants who will have more time, and that's maybe the one advantage. We will give you a little bit more time to speak, each of you. The discussion here, I think we want to focus is we have heard from those who highlighted the importance of access to influential decision makers. And that was the story from Rima al-Bizm about political lobbying in the United States. We heard about incredible, the doctors we all know have accomplished miracles in Syria. And now what we would like to focus on is not so much a sector per se, but talk about knowledge. We all know how much the brain drain in Syria was a disaster for the country, and that after 2011, this has accelerated to the point where the country was almost emptied of its intellectual resources. And so by putting this question to our two speakers, I would like to ask them really not so much to focus on their sector as research or knowledge or education, higher education, but rather to tell us what has succeeded in their work, what they see as the most critical assets or the critical factors of success when they work, what are the real difficulties you are facing in what you have attempted to do or are trying to do. And if we were to look at the future, how do you see that your work can improve in particular circumstances or in working any differently from the way you have done so far? Our purpose here is to highlight what are the factors of success and the obstacles to the work in each and every sector, and also to say what you see as possible improvements, and particularly if there were a network of diaspora Syrians operating, how would you see its contribution? What would you expect from such a network? It's a question to the panelists, a question to the room here. We would like to have some of you also send us messages in that respect about what you would expect. Why would you welcome, if you welcome, the formation of a diaspora network? And if you are here, it means you do have some interest, but what would you expect more specifically? And for the panel on the knowledge and the bridging the brain drain, which is how we work around the brain drain, I'm asking Dr. Nasser Rabat, who is who holds the chair of the Aga Khan for Cultural Heritage at MIT in Boston. And he will address that question. Madame Elena Barocco is the director of the program called the Sampaio Fellowship Program or Scholarship Program. She will tell us more precisely if she likes to specify. And the Sampaio program is a very ambitious and generous, I should say, program of scholarships for Syrian students specifically to have access to higher education. And the Sampaio program is within the Gulbenkian Foundation, well known in Portugal, and has given special attention to Syria. So my questions are what I have just said. What do you feel you have been able to achieve thanks to human resources, thanks to structures you've worked through, thanks to networks you have mobilized in your particular fields or initiatives? Should I start with Mrs. Barroco? Tfadal.
Before addressing some of your questions, I would give you an overview of what we have been doing in Portugal. So, first of all, I'm a Portuguese diplomat working with our former President of the Republic, Mr. Sampaio, as you have mentioned. And in 2013, when in Europe the Syrian crisis was not yet in the headlines, in the region there was already a huge flux of refugees. And so in our country, with the support of the Portuguese government, we decided to focus on something that, and this was the terms of reference of our mandate, should produce results on the ground and would provide some added value to what was already being done to address this humanitarian crisis. And at that time, we made some researches, and at the end of the day, we decided to focus on higher education. And I must say that higher education is a very neglected issue in crisis situation. And just to give you an idea of the neglect, according to the UNHCR, among refugees, only 1% have access to higher education, whereas globally, 36% of young people have access to higher education. So you see the huge gap that has to be closed. On top of that, if you think of a war-torn country, you have immediately to think of rebuilding this country. And so since day one of a crisis, higher education should be in the agenda. Otherwise, you don't have a new generation of leaders prepared to rebuild the society and to rebuild the country if you don't start on time. So with this in mind, we decided to design an emergency scholarship program for Syrians on the best practices available. And after having discussed with a number of organizations who had already some experience, such as, for instance, in the UNHCR, those who deal with the so-called DAFI program, or in New York with the IIE, the Institute of International Education, etc. We started our preparatory work from May 2013 until the end of that year, and in March 2014 we were able to invite the first group of Syrian students, a small group, 45, to resume their studies in Portugal. The next academic year, we enlarged to 100 students. The year after, 155. And we also enlarged the scholarships to other countries. So you see, it's a small program, but I must say that it is extremely successful. Out of the 152 or 3 students to whom we gave scholarships, 44 have already finished their master's degrees, and they are already working in their field of studies. So for us, it's very rewarding, because we made quite a lot of efforts, and it was very successful with the results that we got on the ground. Regarding the success. Why this was successful? I think that for two main reasons. Firstly, because we developed a holistic approach. We didn't only give scholarships and left the students cope with all the challenges, but we really developed what we call a proximity follow-up in a way that we could spot at an early stage sometimes problems of adaptation or whatever. So an holistic approach in our view is very important. And secondly, these programs have to be based on two basic principles: partnerships and flexibility. Partnerships because we managed to do that starting from scratch everything, thanks to partnerships that we have made with universities, with companies, with foundations, philanthropies, and also with political support. Because without political commitment, you are nowhere. And so it's very important also to work out this point. My main frustration or what doesn't work as well as we would like.
So I'm going to actually twist it a little bit to bring in what I know. And I'll start by saying, as a historian, I want to actually bring in a little bit of history to what we're talking about. Brain drain is a problem that all colonial societies have suffered from, of course, actually. It's not something that has happened specifically in Syria. And this is something that goes back to the 40s and the 50s. But Syria, unfortunately, since 1963, has been ruled by a naive yet parochial and dictatorial regime that at the beginning thought that one way of establishing its authority is to nationalize the educational system and force the educational system to follow certain very rigid guidelines about what's acceptable and what's not. So what has happened in Syria and before the revolution is basically the disintegration of the educational system to the point where many of the Syrians who actually have university degrees were not really on par with their equivalents in not the first world, but in the third world. And that created a problem in basically staffing the positions, the technocratic and technological and political positions in the country itself, and that suited the regime absolutely, because all they cared about was loyalty. The other flip of the coin is a lot of people, of course, who were very much interested in their education and improving their education left the country. So the usual brain drain that happened in every country and has happened for the 30, 40 years before 1960s, 1970s, has multiplied in Syria with the fact that people who were politically active were forced to leave because otherwise they would be arrested, and people who were motivated to be educated also left. I'll give you just one anecdotal evidence. A relative of mine was the head of the Medical Association of Damascus, and as such, he was responsible for memberships of medical doctors in Damascus. And this is in the early 1970s, so at the beginning of the reign of Hafiz al-Assad. And he had 14,500 paying members, of whom 8,500 lived in Syria. The others were paying their dues to be members of a medical association, but were not living in Syria. This is almost half of the educated medical doctors in what was still probably the best medical school teaching in Arabic in the Arab world, and one of the still functioning medical schools in Syria, or one of the still functioning university faculty in Syria. Add to that now what has happened since the beginning of the revolution, and we have now a generation that is extremely badly educated inside Syria, a generation that has totally lost its opportunity for an education outside Syria in the camps of refugees and so on. So we have an amazingly dire situation about education, about knowledge, about research, about production of knowledge. But at the same time, something that I care about a lot, we have also lost the opportunity to teach Syrians about civics, about how to be citizens, about how to function in a society. All of that has eroded. And at this point in time, I would say the Syrians have very little opportunities to do that. So the job of those who are interested in education, in the building of a knowledge base, is tremendous. And it is almost impossible in certain areas. I'm not going to speak at all about what should happen in Syria itself. The revamping of the educational system is going to require the efforts of thousands of individuals and multiple organizations and huge funding. But I want to say that at this point in time, most of the educational initiatives are in Western countries, and they are trying to either salvage some of the uneducated young Syrians who are now in refugee camps in countries around Syria, or they are trying to do, and this is an important point, helping Syrians gain higher education. And exactly as you were talking about in Portugal, the same is happening in different countries of diaspora. In the US, I will just mention the organization called JSUR, which has been very active in trying to provide Syrian citizens who have been admitted to American and Canadian universities with financial support. They even actually have signed a course with about 35 universities in Northern America, between the US and Canada, to accept Syrian students that are going to be half funded by these universities. So we have now universities in the US who are paying half of the tuition of the Syrian students that have been accepted. About 150 have graduated so far, and there are about 150 that are now benefiting from the program. Of course, it's only a drop in a bucket. It's really not that much when we think about how many people are in need of education. But this is the kind of model that we need. We need a proactive organization that can advocate for the acceptance of Syrians in universities to basically gain higher education, and at the same time provide for the second half of that tuition, which actually JSUR has done with the Asfari Foundation, among many other foundations, where they raise the funds to support these students. So the task is amazingly difficult, and it is absolutely necessary. We are suffering, as I started saying, with the lack of education at two very crucial levels: the higher end of knowledge, the production of knowledge at the level of universities and graduate schools, and now the most basic level of knowledge that would create individuals that can at least function in today's society, that can read science, that can actually read manuals of the machines that they are going to operate, and so on and so forth. These two are very different endeavors and require very different approaches, and this is what we really need to work on.
How you see the contribution of a diaspora network? Why would this group be a group that you would want to talk to? What would you like to talk to them about? Is it knowledge about Syria? Is it the way they operate? Is it different options here? But I would very much like, I think, and this group would like to hear from you how you would see a diaspora network contribute to improving your work, contributing to your work, or cooperating with you.
I think it can be very useful, at least at two levels. One, to rebuild the sense of a community. Because what I have noticed in dealing with our Syrian students is that this war has a huge impact in their views about how to live together. So this concept of social fabric is as destroyed as the country. So I think that this platform could be a way to bring people together from all walks of life, from all beliefs and political views, and try really to develop this sense of a community, of living together with differences, and start a process of reconciliation. I think it's not the appropriate word, but rebuilding the society, the social fabric. So this is number one, and this can be translated in various activities such as workshops on soft skills, etc. The second thing, and again, taking my modest experience in dealing with Syrian students, Syrian young people, I think that a way of avoiding the brain drain, because when we speak about higher education, sometimes we are told, okay, but you are contributing to a brain drain. First of all, I think it's better to have a brain, even if you risk the brain drain. So having educated young people is better than rather not. But a way of, at least as we are dealing with our students again, a way of avoiding or diminishing the risk of Syrians to become, let's say, too indifferent to their country, is to organize workshops on various things that will be crucial to rebuild war-torn Syria. I'm going to give an example. In summer, we will organize a summer school for young architects, Syrian architects, on rebuilding Syria. So bringing together all Syrian students. We hope that we can also invite some from the diaspora, and asking them to think about 1 or 3 or 4 projects, for instance, social housing or using the public space. And so engaging the diaspora in rebuilding or figuring out what can be their future country, their future society, can be a very good thing to do and very concrete. Thank you.
That is a benefit to the country as much as if they were to come back. Today, the world is so networked. The industries, the production of knowledge is so intermingled all around the world that it's impossible to say that I'm going to bring my slice and put it in my own space. As a matter of fact, the most successful countries in the use of brains are the countries that allow free movement of brains, right and left. The US is, of course, on top of that list. There is no fear in the US about people leaving because, of course, actually they are being offered very good conditions to stay. But when they leave, there is no measures, artificial or otherwise, that would say you cannot leave, you cannot go and work elsewhere. This reminds me, for those of you who know something about the Arabic history, of an anecdote that I'm going to share, if I may. It will take 15 seconds. The famous Caliph Harun al-Rashid was sitting on the top of his palace one day in Baghdad, and up in the sky, one little cloud was moving. And those of you who know Baghdad know that it's an extremely dry and hot place, and it doesn't rain that much. And this one cloud, single cloud, looked like if it was going to rain. And everyone in the city was looking up to it, but the cloud kept on moving and went away. But Harun Rashid looked at it and said, "Go and rain wherever you want. The income from your rain is coming back to me." So I think actually the same for go and be creative wherever you want. As long as you have a sense of belonging and a sense of commitment, the benefit from your brain is going to come back one way or the other. And now I'll move to just 2 practical points about the experience. And I would say that the diaspora can do 2 things that would help the young Syrians seeking to better their lot in the knowledge business in the world. The first is, of course, funding. And we need more foundations that are run by Syrians. They could be wealthy Syrians that have their own foundations, but they could also be sort of like a communal effort. I'll give you one example. There is one organization in Houston, Texas, that is the Arab Scientific Committee, that has actually managed to raise from among the people there the $2 million that Rice University requires in order to create an endowed position. The position is now occupied by a brilliant Lebanese scholar, and it's a position in Arabic history at Rice University. One could think along the same line. Of course, actually, there might be smaller efforts at the beginning. The second is preparatory classes. Basically, Syrians are not equipped with the level of knowledge that they need in order to compete for the best universities, not even actually for middle-level universities. They need help. I know individuals here in Paris that are doing that to Syrians who are coming to get into the universities here in France. But also in the United States, there are a few other organizations, not among Syrians, but one can learn from them. And there's one organization that I have a direct experience with, and that is the Aga Khan organization, given the fact that I am the Aga Khan professor at MIT. They have an institution in London that is called the Institute for Ismaili Studies. They bring Ismaili students from all around the world who are the product of educational systems that cannot allow them to get into British universities. They get them there for a year or two, and they give them preparatory classes, not just English language, but if they are going to go and study history, they'll give them a few classes in history. If they are going to go and do sociology, they'll give them a few classes in sociology, so that at the end of their second year, they are at the level of being able to compete for positions in universities. This is what is needed for the Syrians, and the diaspora can do it, and can do it very easily. I mean, there are a lot of us who could volunteer classes for Syrians in material that we know, and allow them ultimately to improve their chances of getting into good universities. So funding and preparatory education, or improvement of the education, is something that the diaspora can definitely do.
Thank you. This is hugely useful. I think you've been quite concrete in your suggestions. I will take 2 minutes just to indicate that there is a program that we have developed at the Arab Reform Initiative. And the success of it is based on the fact that the need was expressed from inside. The idea did not come from us. It came from inside the besieged area of Douma. And the people in Douma said, students are graduating from baccalaureate, they're taking their high school degree, they don't have access to higher education. Can we organize something? And we said, yes, we can look at what resources you have in terms of faculty to teach, and we will complement that with teaching online from abroad. And we have developed a program called Tahdir, which in fact works and brings knowledge inside the communities. So your offer to provide classes would be something we would welcome hugely into our educational platform online.
This is not me offering a personal offer.
I understand.
I'm actually saying that this is something that could be organized. Of course, I mean, to the limit of my knowledge, I'll be willing to help, of course. I'm not saying that, no.
Of course.
Yeah.
The point here is to mobilize Syrian
diaspora
university professors, academic skills, in order to bring this teaching
and
inside.
Researchers,
okay.
and
of course,
I mean,
research.
medical doctors to prepare students to go into medical schools.
It's endless
and so
what we can do, but the idea of communicating that through technology is, I think, is a promising area to explore. Okay, if there are any questions.
I'm Mohammed Al-Hammadi. I'm the Syrian NGO Alliance Coordinator, and currently I'm a focal point between the diaspora NGOs in Europe and Turkey. I feel that we are like forgetting the humanitarian needs in Syria. We have very underfunded now response, and we are talking about great diaspora role in other issues. But I feel that we need to refocus again And that's because also the Roundtable all focusing on other issues. Why I think there are a greater role for diaspora in the humanitarian needs and assistance still to be played.
انه يكون مجموعه واسعه من هؤلاء اللي مطلعين على تطورات القانون في العالم الحر يشكلوا فعلا مجموعه بثقل معين. يوم اللي بيصير في مجال إصلاح القطاع القضائي في سوريا، إصلاح القضاء، يكونوا هن بيمثلوا هالثقل المجموعة المهنية، بتحمل المصداقية وبتحمل طبعا أخلاقيات المهنة، لأنه هي المنظومة يعني فاسدة أخلاقيا قبل أن تكون تقنيا غير صالحة. فهذا أحد النماذج من خلال منصة إلكترونية.
الحقيقة السوريين دورهم كتير ضعيف، لسبب أسسنا مؤسسة سمات يلي هدفها أنه تخلي صوت السوري يبقى مسموع. وأنا أعتقد على أنه واحدة من أهم الأشياء اللي لازم نشتغل عليها يلي هي أنه ما نستنى للحظة يلي يكون في دور للصوت السوري. الصوت السوري لازم يكون مسموع علميا معرفيا عن طريق النشر، والنشر بكثافة. والنموذج الإسرائيلي نموذج كتير واضح بالنسبة لي، ولازم نبقى واعيين له. الإسرائيليين ما بينشروا قمة في الأعمال على التقدير بالمجالات اللي أنا بعمل فيها التاريخ الإسلامي، لكن بينشروا بكثافة. فلما بدك تكتب بحث عن موضوع بالتاريخ الإسلامي لا يمكنك تفادي المقالات والكتب اللي ناشرينها الإسرائيليين لأنه كثيفة. السوريين وجودهم بسوق العلم ضعيف. فهلا أنا وجهة نظري عملية الكواليتي أقل أهمية من الكوانتيتي. أنا بودي هلا إنه يكون عمل الدياسبورا هو إيصال الصوت السوري بتعثراته، بخيباته، بعدم إمكانيته للتعامل مع النظام المعرفي العالمي الجديد، لكن يكون في صوت سوري، ويكون الصوت السوري موجود على كل هالأصعدة يلي رح يصير فيها تدخل، بحيث إنه لما حدا بده يتدخل ما يقول انه طب نحن ما مثل دائما بيقولوا لنا مين البديل او مين بيحكي عن سوريا. بكل المجالات ما حدا شكله عم بيحكي عن سوريا. وانا اعتقد انه هذا واحد من اهم الاشياء اللي لازم نعملها في سبيل بموضوع المعرفه.
شكرا ناصر. We switch to English once more and give the last word to Elena for this session. تفضلي.
Thank you. Just to add, when I was listening to your intervention on the need to generate more discussions on legal issues and also related to the future of Syria, I was thinking that it's also extremely important to try to motivate young people to choose for their university studies legal issues, political issues, public policies, because I have realized from the thousands of applications that we receive for our scholarships that for sure 90% the choices are focused on engineering issues, informatics, etc. And there is really no appetite at all for social sciences, political sciences, public policies, and you cannot rebuild a country if you don't prepare the next generation to deliver good public policies. So here I think there is a very important role to be played. Don't ask how, but I'm sure there are ways to. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you.